So with Geordie, with Anthony Albanese's return to Australia following what Sky News would have described as his holiday in China, Parliament has proceeded to kick off again, hasn't it?
It has, James. The 48th Parliament has commenced as of last week. And it was an interesting week. Before I get into some of the bills that have been put forward towards Parliament, I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the instances that happened during the week.
Of course.
So the Maverick, one of our favourite, Bob Katter, has returned to Parliament.
Arguably Australia's most based politician.
I would agree on that.
Arguably. I'm stressing the arguably, yes.
So Bob Katter refused to swear allegiance to King Charles during the initial ceremony and said, no, I swear allegiance to the Australian people, and was seen dozing off during the opening speech by the Attorney General.
He really is a unique figure, isn't he?
He is a unique figure. I think the Parliaments, we're all better off having him there, honestly.
I completely agree.
So notably, the Parliament will have Australia's youngest ever senator. She is a South Australian Labor MP called Charlotte Walker. I think it's a bit of a breath of fresh air, being 21 years old. It's good to see some young people inside Parliament, especially that the median age of Australian politicians is 50.
Yeah, and that's, I think, an issue that's probably reflects some of the things that people are feeling in Australia, especially young people, where they're feeling their views, their voices, and their views are not properly represented.
That's exactly
decision
right.
Making
No, definitely, and we see that in America. Obviously, it's been dubbed a bit of a gerontocracy because the median age in America must be what, in the 70s or 80s.
I think they've had like 3 Democratic Congress people just die. Just left a huge issue for them in terms of voting.
No, it's really good. I think it's wonderful that there's a young woman, 21 years old, in the Australian Senate, representing the interests and values of young people. So no, it's good. So as the kind of the pompous ceremonies were kicking off, and we had the 21 gun salute, there was mass demonstrations out the front of Parliament House. There was thousands of people demonstrating against the slaughter that's going on in Gaza. And during the ceremonies, you could hear the protests from inside some of the chambers. People actually came in and started making a commotion. And so what happened was the Greens Senator Marine Faruqi brought a placard into Parliament House during the ceremony, and she sat there in silent protest, and the placard read, "Gaza is starving, words won't feed them, sanction Israel now." And as the Prime Minister walked past, she actually said to the PM, she said, "Prime Minister, children are starving, please sanction Israel." Which, to no one's surprise, he did not reply. However, in response to the placard that Faruqi displayed, instead of actually sanctioning Israel, the Senate decided to pass a motion, led by Penny Wong, to sanction Marine Faruqi instead.
Really?
Yeah, so here's some of the exchange.
Oh, goodness.
Respected the rules of the Parliament by holding up a sign for the duration of the Governor-General's address on the opening of this term of Parliament. Now, what we saw this week is what we have seen before from Senator Faruqi. Senator Faruqi demands respect, but she does not offer it. She denigrates anyone who doesn't agree with her on everything regularly, including personally. I don't think this is the leadership Australians expect. I don't believe this is what Australian democracy is about.
Senator Faruqi, like any one of us, has had ample opportunity to raise her concerns within this chamber, outside of this chamber, through the media, through statements, or even, should she choose, through peaceful protest. What she chose instead was to use one of the most important moments on the parliamentary calendar to stage a protest that was entirely inappropriate in both setting and manner. The Senate is not a forum for street theatre. It is not.
Senator Cash, remove your seat. Remove the interjector and turn the broadcasting off. Remove the interjector and turn broadcasting off.
Labor and the coalition in this chamber wants to avoid the truth. You don't want to see it or hear it. And now here we are. You want to force me to apologise for telling the truth. Well done. You can all pat yourselves on the back and move on while Palestinians are slaughtered. I do want to draw attention to the words of Martin Luther King in his letter from a Birmingham jail. And it seems especially relevant while you all sit here and censure me for breaking what you call the decorum of Parliament, of my failure to be polite or respectful while a genocide unfolds, while kids are being killed. He wrote of his frustration with the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who seeks only the absence of tension rather than the presence of justice, who says, I agree with the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your ways of achieving it, who has a paternalistic belief they can set the timetable and decorum of another people's freedom. Well, you can set your standards because you don't want to see the truth. You don't want to do anything about the genocide. And one day, you know what? One day, you will all have to explain to your children and grandchildren where you stood when tens of thousands of men, women, and children were being slaughtered. And I wouldn't like to be in your shoes then, because you are all on the wrong side of history.
Powerful statement from Marine Faruqi. Absolutely, and I think she echoes the sentiment of probably lots of Australians, and probably a lot of Australians inside the political system as well, I think, that are getting further and further outraged and disgusted by the stance that their representatives are taking.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I'd just like to congratulate the Labor Party and the Liberal Party on sanctioning a Green senator on speaking out against the ongoing slaughter in Gaza and not actually sanctioning Israel. So good on them.
Yeah, and this whole concept of just sanctioning people you don't like, it's really starting to take off.
It is.
We saw Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur, get sanctioned by the US State Department, and now we've seen Marine Faruqi get sanctioned by the Labor government and the coalition government. Yeah. What does that entail?
Sorry?
What does being sanctioned entail?
Oh, so she's going to...
Well, could she not use her bank card or something
anymore? She's not going to be able to travel with any of the delegations overseas for the remainder of this parliament.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think she's banned from speaking for the next 5 days as well.
Goodness.
Yeah. So basically, if anyone voices an opinion that you don't agree with, you just sanction them.
Well, yeah, so it's like a naughty corner. She's been naughty, and she has to sit in a naughty corner.
Yeah. And, honestly, as she said, screw the decorum of Parliament while the genocide is taking place.
I do completely agree with her, and especially the complaint that during the Governor-General's address was when she staged her protest when...
But she just held a placard up.
Yeah, it's not a very... Yeah, she wasn't out there, bashing people or leading, rioters or, masked insurgents into Parliament or anything like that. And I do also think that the Governor-General is actually a perfect example of how undemocratic the parliamentary system in Australia actually is, whereas the Governor-General, as a representative of the Queen, does actually kind of have the final say over what happens in Australia.
Yeah, that's exactly
completely rendering the whole circus of Parliament null and void if they so desire.
Yeah.
So I personally have no time for the Governor-General.
So, Faruqi's protest came just after 27 countries, including France, Australia and the UK, condemned Israel's government drip-feeding of aid into the Strip and its inhumane killing of Palestinians. So it seems that this government only has words for the condemnation for Israel's barbarity and political sanctions levelled against those who oppose the slaughter taking place. A sick irony that is not lost on me, James. Mm-hmm. However, it's not just the Greens who are opposing the ongoing genocide. Matthew Knott, writing for the Sydney Morning Herald, has reported that across the nation, local Labor branches are demanding sanctions against Israel. So, quoting from the article, 78 Labor branches have passed motions calling for far-reaching sanctions against Israel entities and individuals involved in the war and a two-way arms embargo against Israel, including the supply of military parts and components. The branches include one in Foreign Minister Penny Wong's home city of Adelaide and 3 in Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's Sydney electorate of Grayndler. So we have now, up to 80 branches now across the nation demanding sanctions against Israel. So I think that's quite interesting.
Well, it's a pretty big indication that the population is not on board.
Yeah, the actual there's grassroots movements within inside the ALP to put more pressure against Israel for sure.
It'll be interesting to see how the ALP leadership reacts and what stance they take, and also how far they can go in actually ignoring the demands of their constituency.
Yeah, well, I think we'll see more of what we have been seeing, words that don't really mean anything or do anything, strong words of condemnation. In fact, just last Thursday, the PM released this statement. He said that the situation in Gaza has gone beyond the world's worst fears. The position of the Australian government is clear. Every innocent life matters. Every Israeli, every Palestinian. This conflict has stolen far too many innocent lives. He went on to say that tens of thousands of civilians are dead, children are starving, Gaza is in the grip of a humanitarian catastrophe. Israel's denial of aid and the killing of civilians, including children seeking access to water and food, cannot be defended or ignored. We call on Israel to comply immediately with its obligations under international law.
It's good that he actually, in that statement, did point the finger, did kind of assert that Israel is the one killing the civilians and preventing aid, because beforehand they've always kind of perpetually framed it as this situation where, oh, these people are just dying. You know, this child tripped over and, you know, landed on a bullet.
However, the language still is there, James, I should point out, when he says this conflict has stolen too many lives, as if there's just this kind of conflict out there taking people's lives.
Snatching people.
Yeah. Well, it's not actually the IDF that are slaughtering people.
No, of course not.
No. So, look, while it is great to see that there is an increase of condemnation coming from the Prime Minister, it is actually really good, I think, to see from the grassroots level, from the actual branch level across the nation now that people are putting forwards pressure for actual material sanctions against Israel. So go on.
Yeah, no, definitely. All that I can do is hope that the Australian Labor Party responds to these demands properly, like you're saying, with real material outcome, because I think it would be a massive shame for them to lose their historic political mandate that they gained after the last election and just completely squander it by ignoring the demands of their constituency, which is definitely possible. I mean, we saw the Democrats do that in the United States.
Yes.
We saw, we're watching the Labor Party in the UK under Keir Starmer essentially just shake itself to pieces, trying to reconcile all these contradictions.
Yeah.
And in both instances, we've seen the rise of Reform UK and also the return of the God Emperor himself, Donald Trump, in the United States.
Yeah.
Arguably, both phenomenons which had the previous incumbent parties actually responded to their constituencies, we would not be in this situation now.
That's right, definitely. So, yeah, hopefully the Labor Party actually listens to their base, because that's where the public allows to actually places pressure onside its party to change policy. So it'll be interesting to see whether that actually
God forbid we have actually functioning democracy.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you be? That's a shocking thought, isn't it?
Well, that's what's happening now in the US, where the MAGA base is just up in arms over the Epstein files.
And it's a massive split, and it'll be very instrumental, I think, in the future of the Republican Party and the future of Trump's presidency as well.
Yeah, but it just demonstrates how the party doesn't have to listen to the populace of the base. They really, when they hold the levers of power, they can do what they want.
Exactly, and that is the risk, again, of having a huge electoral mandate, like the Labor Party just did, where they have the wiggle room to not listen to the party, essentially. But Parliament's kicked off with a bang.
It has.
That's exciting.
Yeah, so while we're talking about the Greens, we should mention that obviously the party is trying to rebuild after a pretty dismal election that saw their leader, Adam Bandt and Max Chandler-Mather lose their seats. So only got one MP in the lower house, while they do hold the balance of power in the Senate. However, just this last week, the former leader, Drew Hutton, who formed the party, I believe, with Bob Brown many, many decades ago, has appeared on the ABC and has had some allegations to level against the party, and we'll have a listen to this.
What do you mean that the Greens have been taken over by a cult?
Well, there are plenty of really good people in the Greens, and I still identify as having Green politics. Always have had, always will have. But over the last decade or so, it would seem that some people have come into the Greens with the determination to take it over, to convert it into the sort of party one of whose main preoccupations is with transgender rights. Now, I've got no problem with transgender rights, but what they've done is they have a closed set of beliefs. They have a closed language, which they understand, but nobody else does. And they've got an absolutely rigorous determination to stop any dissent from occurring to the things that they think are important. And the main things they think are important are that we get rid of the notion of biological sex and replace it with gender identity.
You say that this change in the Greens has made the party, in your words, weird and unlikable. Does it also make Greens members unelectable?
Well, we'll have to see, Sarah. I don't know whether it makes them unelectable or not, but I do know.
Well, you say this has been going on for 10 years, so presumably you have got some evidence. So is it actually having an impact on Greens' electoral support?
I think it is. Look, there is a clear need for a party like the Greens, or for a political force in there that is saying the sorts of things that the Greens should be saying. But there is also this fairly authoritarian and aggressive and unlikable element to the Greens that I think people in the community are responding to. They do acknowledge that there's a role for the Greens, and I acknowledge that too. But the fact that there is an element of authoritarianism creeping into the party, a disdain for freedom of speech, which is exemplified by the treatment of me, and I might add by dozens of other members of the Greens, mostly women, mostly good conservationists who've been forced out of the party.
How many people do you say have been forced out of the party on this issue of Greens' support for transgender rights? I've
been contacted by 40 former members of the Greens. Now, about half of them have been expelled, and the other half have been forced out by being subjected to massive complaints. They've weaponised the complaint system. This faction, this cult that I call them, has taken over all the key committees in the party, including the disciplinary committees. So members are hauled before these committees, as I was, and in a bit of a star chamber, they're expelled. Now, a lot of people don't even want to go through that process because it is so distressing and traumatic, so they just leave the party. We've lost some of the best talent, the best conservationists, best environmental campaigners in the party have left because they've been subject to this really bad treatment by this faction of the Greens.
Do you think it's a serious complaint, James, or do you think Drew Hutton, a man that's 78 years old, is just a little bit out of touch?
Well, I think it's an interesting topic, and it's a topic that I think we always have to approach with a bit of nuance.
Yes.
Because obviously you have to preface, or I personally have to preface that by saying that, people of all genders, identities, races, religions, ethnicities have equal rights. I think that we just need to establish that. I do find it interesting how it seems to me the thrust of his complaint is that, and I think we've seen this across all sides of the political spectrum, say in the last 15 years, for example, where we have seen the identity politics overtake the actual material political goals.
All the core issues of the party, like environmentalism with the Greens, for example.
Absolutely. And I think what that does, I think that's a very conscious thing. I think we've kind of brushed on the subject before, but it's a very conscious issue, creation of an issue to create problems which will further divide populations, divide support bases, and then essentially neuter them, so they don't have the power to stand up to the big polluters, the big mining companies, for example. But that's not just something I see with the Greens. I see that on all sides. I see that with, for example, the far left, with these kind of identity politics issues, but then the far right does the exact same thing.
Especially with like net zero targets and renewable energy.
Absolutely, and then they love the trans issue as well because it gives them something they can get riled up about as well. So it's this self-perpetuating loop that takes the whole political conversation further and further away from what's actually important.
Yeah, for sure.
That's my opinion. That being said, obviously, Drew Hutton is a 78-year-old man.
Yes.
I'm sure back in his time, he was probably quite progressive.
Yes.
That's why he founded the Green Party.
Yeah.
But again, I'm not sure of the internal party dynamics, or where hearing is one person's views.
It's a bit of a he said, she said.
It is a he said.
However,
she
he
said.
does raise an interesting question when it comes to political parties, whether you should have unanimity on issues, and whether the party comes to a conclusion on something, whether you then move on from it, or whether you keep going back and debating it per se.
Of course, and I'm not sure how the internal arrangement of the Greens Party operates, but I'd imagine you do need to have some sort of forward momentum.
Yes.
So by kind of just endlessly having debates, endlessly going back to these debates about these issues which are further subtracting from your material goals isn't productive. Obviously, times change and political circumstances change, and it is important to have constant analysis of things that you might have done in the past. You might have to update your position.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure where the balance lies. I'm not a member of a political party having these conversations.
I would say that go on.
I was just going to say, I do think it is important to have party discipline, but there also needs to be a bit of flexibility there as well. So I'm not sure where you draw that line.
For sure. I think it does also highlight the progress of the party. So obviously the Greens have tried to become more of a broad-based political party, obviously representing more social issues as well, and not just environmental issues. Or I guess the old guard, represented by Drew Hutton, is saying we need to go back to our cause of environmental protection,
of course,
and environmentalism.
Yep.
So you can definitely see that tension there.
No, definitely. And I think, but I think this is quite well reflected by the Greens' performance in the last election.
Yeah.
But they got wiped out.
Yeah.
So obviously that message that they were advocating for hasn't resonated with the same amount of people that it did 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's not for me to I'm impartial to that, but it's interesting because they'll have to do their own internal auditing and checks and research and see what does the population want and how can we appeal to that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. It's not good for them though, because as you can imagine, the kind of legacy media, the right wing Sky News media, have just jumped on them because he obviously called them a queer and trans cult. So the opposition to the Greens have loved this.
The Murdoch media will be loving it. Yeah. But the sad thing is that just completely detracts from the original environmental protectionist message of the Greens as well.
That's
so it doesn't help anyone.
And I think that's what
I
think that's what Hutton's trying to bring to light as well, and saying that we need to go back to focusing on environmentalism. And look, maybe there is some truth in what he says, that really talking about social and kind of identity politics and bringing that to the forefront maybe does alienate some people. A lot of people, I'd say, potentially aren't as interested in that, and maybe there is a segment of the Greens base that do want to focus more on environmental conservation.
Yeah, and I think maybe you might agree with me or disagree with me, but I think at the end of the day, they're not I'm not sure on his position, but these people, they might just have the position of, well, I actually don't really care about identity politics. That has nothing to do with
that shouldn't be our focus.
That shouldn't be our focus, and we shouldn't let that detract itself. But I think that's just like kind of postmodernist political ideology, isn't it? You just don't actually talk about anything, and you just go around in circles forever and ever, debating these pointless definitions and stopping anything getting done. And meanwhile, the environment gets destroyed, and everyone gets poorer, and capital keeps accumulating.
Yeah. So while that has been happening during the commencement of Parliament, there has been some legislation and bills put forwards that are definitely worth discussing. So firstly, the Labor Party has put forwards their education... oh my God, fuck that.
That's all right. That's all right.
Start again. Sorry. Let's go.
Just go. Yeah. Sorry.
So as those antics were kicking off during the first week, there was some legislation that was put forwards in Parliament. So the Education Reductions Act has been put forwards, which will see a 20% wiped from the balances of trade sport loans and the HECS higher education loans of the 1st of June last month. Furthermore, the payment threshold, that is the minimum that one must earn before repaying an education loan, will increase from $54,000 to $67,000. The Coalition has indicated that it will support the bill, while the Greens would like to add some amendments in the Senate, such as abolishing indexation and wiping the Job Ready Graduate Scheme, which subsidised STEM subjects while increasing the cost of humanities subjects. So we've discussed this previously. This was an election promise that the Labor Party ran on. It's good to see that this is the first bill that they're putting forward and would like to pass. 20% is good. I don't think it does address the kind of structural issues of higher education, whether that is university or going to TAFE. Obviously, they have free TAFE positions now, which is great. However, the price of many of the university diplomas are exorbitant, to say the least. And increasing the threshold from 54 to 67K just means that people will earn more money before they actually have to pay it off. Exactly. So, however, 20%, that's great. Happy days. I think it's affecting 6 million people in Australia have a HECS or some sort of trade support loan. So
I'm one of those people.
It is,
it's good. So that is good for me. Yeah.
Smile to both our faces. Secondly, the government also wants to legislate award and penalty rates within the retail sector. So the bill is a response to the retail lobbies' push to bargain away overtime and penalty rates in exchange of a 15% pay rise.
There you go.
Yeah.
I think that's a dog act.
What's that?
They're trying to get rid of penalty rates.
Yeah.
That is a very dog act,
yes, it is.
in my opinion.
Yeah. So in case viewers weren't aware, over the past 30 years under the Enterprise Bargaining Agreement, workers and employers have negotiated wages and working conditions across a range of industries. The Act basically decentralises such negotiations and removes the government from dictating how wages and conditions are agreed upon. It's basically the government's coming in and saying, hey, employers, especially in the retail sector, these are the big employers in Australia, people that work inside the supermarket industry, obviously Kmart, etc. They want to come in and say, hey, we want to bargain away your overtime, your penalty rates on the weekend in exchange for a pay rise. However, that, in my opinion, probably benefits the employer in the long run, because then they can change their hours and make it less flexible for workers who would rather work potentially on the weekend and earn a little bit more money.
Absolutely. And obviously, the retail sector, I believe, is probably the busiest. That's when they have their highest turnovers on the weekends.
That's right.
However, again, I think that's a very dog act because especially, part-time workers and that sort of stuff, if you maybe have, say, 4 shifts a week, we say you work 4 8-hour shifts a week at like a large retail, like a Kmart or a JB Hi-Fi or something like that, you might have a Saturday shift and a Sunday shift and maybe 2 shifts scattered throughout the week. The bulk of your income is going to be coming from that weekend work, of course, and that's going to slash the amount of money that you earn if obviously you're getting a 15% pay raise, which will get eaten away through tax and inflation anyway, as opposed to, and that'll drastically reduce your overall earning potential for the week.
And so the coalition have come out and voiced concerns that this could hurt small business. However, as I would argue, I don't think the retail lobby probably represents many small Australian businesses.
Absolutely not. I think the retail lobby probably wants to hurt small business to increase their monopoly.
Correct. Yes. That's exactly right. So I think it's also worth noting that we have seen penalty rates eroded in industry, especially in hospitality over the past 10 years. So I think this is kind of a final push to destroy penalty rates for retail workers on the weekend.
Yeah. And all the big businesses, again, they're still making money. All the big retailers are turning profits. You have to remember that.
So no, I think it is good to see the Labor Party are trying to put forward some industrial relations act straight away. So there's also been a push there's been a push in response to the allegations and reports of serious abuse in the childcare sector. So the government has proposed a childhood safety bill. The bill will seek to increase training for childcare workers, install CCTV monitoring in learning education centres, and restrict public funding to centres that don't comply with the law. There is now a push for a federal and state level childcare workers database. This legislation is a response to the recent stories of abuse and most notably a 26-year-old man who committed over 70 offences of sexual abuse in the childcare sector.
It's a very difficult topic and that did catch the attention of the media on all sides recently, and I think to kind of universal condemnation.
Definitely. So it's got big bipartisan support.
Absolutely,
they'll pass this pretty much straight away. It does also raise the issue, I think, of allowing purely private enterprise to take care of children and the way that we've kind of turned it into a business model here in Australia. Obviously, over the past 5 years now, it's become a really big industry with a lot of money in it. And I think it does raise some serious questions about how we raise our children and who and how we take care of them as well.
Absolutely. And how we obviously regulate, these industries and these sectors as well to ensure that these things do not happen.
Yeah, that's right. So look, hey, it's been a pretty interesting first week, in my opinion. A lot of legislation has been put forward that'll pass over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. And we've had legislation, sanctions. We've had people hurling insults at each other. It's a good start.
Bob Caddis not swearing allegiance to the king,
and then nodding off,
people, and then falling asleep. It wouldn't be a week of Left Hook Media though without me discussing AUKUS game.
I was waiting for it. I was thinking we haven't talked about subs yet, Julian.
We haven't talked about submarines or trilateral security agreements. Yeah. We've just given the US another $800 million.
Bargain.
So earlier in the year, we transferred $800 million. We've now given another $800 million. That's $1.6 billion. We've injected into their industrial sector, and we're going to give them another $800 million before the year is over.
How good. And we haven't received anything, obviously.
We are not receiving anything.
Wow.
So I think we're injecting, $2.4 billion into their submarine industry, and then we're also going to transfer several billions of dollars to the UK as well.
Oh, look, I understand giving protection money to the US because they are the big don. They'll come in and firebomb your business.
They are the mafia don. You got
to
pay your protection money. Yeah.
However, the UK. I'm sorry to all that English viewers if you're only out there, but just get banned. Like, what are you going to do? I'm sorry. What power are you going to firebomb the shop as well? I don't know, possibly. Yeah. But that doesn't just as you kind of just said. Well, yeah, we're making progress payments. We haven't received anything. I'm just thinking that is just a protection racket.
It is. Yeah. It's having an afterpay agreement for no material benefit whatsoever.
Yeah. It's preventative.
Yeah, complete preventative. So as we transferred the $800 million, the brainchild of AUKUS himself, Scott Morrison, just as a footnote I add, there was a recent poll that you may have seen recently.
I have. Yeah.
That was asking who the least favourite Australian Prime Minister was of all time, and Scott Morrison ranked number one.
No surprises there.
He's a very unlikable
man.
He is. However, he appeared before a US congressional committee discussing the strategic competition between the US and China. Notably, he left out Trump's trade war and the current reviewing of AUKUS being undertaken by the Pentagon. So there is a video here of Morrison before the committee. We'll play a little bit of it.
Now infamous list of 14 grievances targeting Australia's domestic laws and sovereign decisions. What should that list tell us about the nature of PRC coercion and the kinds of values it seeks to undermine in democracies?
I think fundamentally it demonstrates that the CCP fundamentally has a problem with representative democracies, and there are some irreconcilable differences between an authoritarian regime in China, as much as an authoritarian regime in Russia or Iran, for that matter, and the activities of free and open states. Late Prime Minister Abe, who Ambassador know well and I knew well also, spoke of a free and open Indo-Pacific. That is a threat and a challenge to regime security in China. And I think we have to be clear-eyed about this and not pretend that there is somehow that this is going to be resolved through discussion. Discussion is fine, engagement is good, it's better than the alternative. But if we think that that is going to produce a change in the mindset in Beijing about what their objectives are, then we're frankly kidding ourselves. So you worked to coexist, to avoid conflict. That requires deterrence and a wide-eyed appreciation of what the Chinese state is all about. At every point, even the most moderate of their leaders, like Jiang Zemin, were very clear about the fact that even when they entered most favoured nation status, they still said to their officials that the West, and particularly the United States, is still looking to see us destroy our socialist system. They won't change. So we have to deal with that reality. I mean, those 14 points of grievances that they tabled, I remember I tabled them at a G7 meeting in Carbis Bay to all the G7 leaders. It was a G7 plus meeting. And I asked the simple question, which of you would relent on any of these points? And The answer was none. These are just the simple behaviours of transparent representative democracies with market-based economies. And so know that you believe those things, keep investing in those things, and understand what the red lines are that are produced by holding those beliefs. The other thing I would say is make sure that you're building your internal resilience to coercion, and that you mentioned in your opening remarks, Mr. Chairman, that a whole of society approach is necessary. I completely 100% agree. And our response dealt with everything from interference in our political system through ensuring that we kept an open mic for free speech in our parliaments and media and so on. You need to build the internal resilience, and that means an appreciation of the potential threat. And that is somewhat in jeopardy in Australia. Most recently, the Lowy Institute completed a survey, which for the first time in quite a number of years, there is a greater value on the economic partnership with China than concerns about the security threat, and I'll table that for the committee. That is an objective of the CCP, that Western democracies will go to sleep on the threat.
I'm glad to see that we're back to the axis of evil.
The axis. He had to throw Iran in there, didn't he?
Yeah.
I haven't realised how much I have enjoyed not having to listen to that man on a daily basis when he was our Prime Minister. He's quite infuriating.
He is.
I do think, honestly, we could probably spend a whole episode dissecting every single sentence he just made in that, 3 minutes of footage. He obviously, I don't think, likes representative democracies very much. During COVID, he essentially, how many portfolios did he...
I think it was 6 or 7 that he consolidated under his control.
Yeah, so that's pretty...
authoritarian.
But, I mean, who would have guessed? He's... The man has essentially become an international arms trader.
That's right.
And he's shilling for war and the need to just facilitate international arms shipments.
Yeah.
What are the odds? Not very Christian of Mr. Morrison, I do have to say.
It's not, James. He, as you say, he really tries to frame it this kind of eternal battle between democracy and authoritarianism. He's like, don't forget about Australia here in the Indo-Pacific. Just remember that China is the long-standing eternal threat, and we need AUKUS.
We're just a plucky little democracy, you know? God.
And it was interesting, he did highlight, he's like, even the most moderate leaders of the Chinese government have always said and always maintained that the US is trying to destroy our socialist system. And it's like, that is not a crazy thing to believe.
No, that's what the Americans say. They're just parroting what they're hearing.
Yeah. So, he obviously is going over there to lobby before Congress to ensure that AUKUS goes ahead, because the Pentagon, the US military and government are reviewing it, and he's also pushed now for Australia to lift military spending from 2% to 3.5% of GDP. This man will not go away.
He won't. And I guess I actually thought he would go away because he was such an odious figure.
An unlikable character.
But I think this is going to be Scott Morrison's trajectory. I think any time there is, public scrutiny or questioning of AUKUS in Australia, the US and the UK, I think we're going to see Scott Morrison kind of pop up and just start shilling for more defence spending and more weapons.
Shilling for militarism and war. He's a very slippery and cunning character, isn't he?
That man is the last person who's going to hold a rifle as well. Goodness. It's sickening.
Yeah,
sickening, but I'm sure we'll be covering Scotty's antics in the future as we go further and further down the AUKUS spiral, I guess.
Let's wrap it up there, James.
No worries, mate. Thank you very much. Another just a banger of a week in Australian Parliament.
It always is, mate.
Yeah.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thanks for viewing. Please like and subscribe. We'll see you later.